Have you ever noticed how people suddenly start acting differently around you? They grow cold, distant, even bitter, and sometimes, it's not because of what you did wrong, it's because of what you did right. You see, when you begin to grow, when you begin to change, when you finally start stepping out of the comfort zones that once trapped you, people notice. They may not say it out loud, they may not even admit it to themselves, but deep down, they feel it, in places they don't talk about. Your growth disturbs the atmosphere they've grown comfortable in. Your progress unsettles the version of you they were used to. It confronts the parts of them that chose to stay the same. The truth is, there are people who liked you better when you were broken, confused, and dependent. They loved the version of you that needed them. It made them feel valuable. It made them feel in control. But when God begins to wake you up, when He starts pulling the scales from your eyes, when you begin walking in purpose, walking in clarity, walking in bold conviction, that's when the shift begins. That's when the ones who used to clap for you suddenly fall silent. That's when the ones who once celebrated you begin to compete with you. That's when the ones who called you friend start whispering behind your back. And it's not because you became a bad person, it's because you finally started becoming you, the real you, the healed you, the focused you, the version of yourself they never thought you'd reach. And let me tell you something. That version doesn't play small anymore. That version doesn't settle. That version doesn't exist to make everyone else comfortable. That version rises. And not everyone around you is ready to rise with you. Some people only loved you as long as you stayed in the box they built for you. The moment you outgrew that box, the moment your dreams got louder than their doubts, they felt threatened. Because when you elevate, it exposes their refusal to move. Your transformation shines a light on their stagnation. Your discipline reveals their distractions. And instead of being inspired, they get offended. That offense, if left unchecked, can quietly grow into distance, and that distance, if not healed, can harden into bitterness, jealousy, even hate. But please, don't take it personal. You are not responsible for the insecurities others carry. You are not required to shrink yourself just so they can feel tall. What's happening here is spiritual. When God begins to increase His hand on your life, when He starts opening doors that your past should have disqualified you from, some people simply cannot handle the favor that follows you. They'll say, "You've changed." But what they really mean is, you're no longer bound. See, people will sit with you in your pain. They'll hold your hand in the valley. But when God starts setting your feet on the mountain, they go silent. Why? Because pain connects, but purpose convicts, and your purpose is starting to speak louder than their excuses. You're not bragging, you're not pretending to be better than anyone else, but your light reminds them of what they've dimmed in themselves, and that's not your fault. There's a cost to growth. It's not always money or time. Sometimes the cost is people. The relationships that once felt like home now feel heavy. The conversations that once gave you life now drain you. The people who once walked beside you now walk away from you. It hurts, but don't resist the separation. Let them mourn the pruning. God is not subtracting to punish you. He's subtracting to protect you. Everyone who starts with you is not assigned to finish with you. You've got to learn to bless those who leave. Pray for those who turn away. Love them, but don't chase them. Their hate doesn't mean you failed, it means you moved forward. It means you've stepped into a place they're not willing to go. The truth is, some people can't handle the version of you that healing created. Some people fell in love with your brokenness because your pain made them feel whole. But you're not broken anymore, you're not confused anymore, you're not living to please the crowd. You're walking to please the King. So the next time you feel the sting of someone's silent hatred, pause and ask yourself, what did I grow out of that they refused to grow into? What version of me are they grieving that I've already buried? And most importantly, what is God trying to make room for in my life by removing what no longer fits my future? There's something powerful about silence, something many people misunderstand. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending yourself, stop performing for approval, some folks will start creating stories to fill the silence you leave behind. And not just stories, accusations, assumptions, suspicions. But the truth is, your silence is not a weapon. It's a witness. It testifies that you no longer owe anyone a performance. That's when the resentment rises, not because you've wronged them, but because you've outgrown the need to prove yourself to them. When you mature, when you find peace in your soul and rest in God's approval, you grow quiet in a world addicted to noise. And that quiet, that confidence, it confuses people who were only ever comfortable when you were anxious, when you needed their validation to breathe, But when you realize you don't have to respond to every opinion or rise to every bait, they feel the shift and some won't like it. People get uncomfortable when you stop giving them access to your emotions. They don't know what to do when you stop rising to their provocations. Some people thrive off your chaos. They love when you overshare. They love when you beg to be understood. But when you choose peace, when you choose stillness, when you stop arguing and start living, that's when the tension rises. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've stepped into a kind of power they can't control. Your silence exposes their insecurity. It doesn't shout, it doesn't need to, but it reveals everything. It makes people confront what's been buried in their hearts, that jealousy they never admitted, that comparison they never spoke out loud, that bitterness they smiled over. When you stop speaking, it forces them to finally hear themselves. And often, what they hear is not pretty. So they blame you, they point fingers, they say you changed, they say you're distant. But really, they're just uncomfortable because they don't know how to function without your need for them. There comes a time when silence becomes necessary, not to ignore, not to hurt, but to protect your mind, your spirit, your destiny. There are seasons when God will call you to say less because your next move isn't meant to be announced, it's meant to be anointed. And some people can't handle that shift. They don't know what to do when you stop broadcasting your pain. They're used to seeing you cry, seeing you chase, seeing you worry, but when you stop running and start resting in God, they'll say you've changed. Maybe you have, maybe you've learned that silence is strength, that peace is power, that not every battle is worth fighting out loud. There are people who will turn against you the moment they realize they can no longer read you. When your eyes stop pleading and your mouth stops defending, they panic because they built their confidence on your chaos. They felt strong when you were weak, they felt wise when you were confused. But now that you've found your footing, now that you've drawn boundaries, they feel powerless. And sometimes, instead of dealing with that truth, they turn it into hate. But let them talk, let them assume, let them twist the silence however they need to. You don't have to explain the peace God gave you. You don't have to answer to the crowd when heaven has already cleared your name. The same people who now question your quiet were the ones who never really listened when you spoke. They weren't invested in your healing, just in your vulnerability. And now that you're not bleeding in front of them, they call it betrayal, but it's not. It's healing, it's maturity, it's growth. You don't owe explanations to those who only showed up to dissect your story. You don't owe conversations to people who've already made up their minds. Sometimes silence is your salvation. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just keep walking, while others keep talking. And yes, some will hate you for it. They'll hate that they no longer have access to your thoughts. They'll hate that they don't know where you're headed next. But that's okay, because your silence is not rejection, it's redirection. It's God saying, "Let me speak for you now." It's God saying, "This next battle won't be won by argument, but by alignment." Let them wonder, let them fill in the blanks. You found your peace, and peace doesn't need to be loud. You just keep walking. We just saw that silence can confuse, distance can protect, and your growth will often challenge the very people who once supported you. But the journey doesn't stop there, it deepens. Because when you truly pour your heart, your time, your whole self into your calling, it shakes the places people have buried. It stirs up the dreams they've walked away from. It reawakens the promises they no longer believe in. It shines a spotlight on the courage they stopped chasing. And instead of letting that confrontation lead them to repentance, instead of allowing your progress to inspire their return to purpose, it leads them to resentment. You see, we live in a world that constantly teaches us to compete, to measure, to compare. It tells us that life is a race and that success is about outshining the next person. But the truth is, your purpose isn't in competition with anyone. You're not trying to outdo them. You're not striving to prove you're better. You're simply letting your light shine, exactly the way God intended. But here's what happens when people have been living in shadows. Light feels like an attack. Your obedience to God offends those who still obey. Fear, your consistency, threatens those who gave up after their first storm. Your joy seems fake to those who have long forgotten how to feel joy themselves. But please, don't let that discourage you. The hatred that comes your way is often not really about you. It's misplaced pain. It's their frustration with their own choices. It's their grief over what they lost. It's their silent anger about where they thought they'd be by now. And you just happen to be standing in front of them when the flood of those emotions breaks loose. But hear me, don't take it personally. It's not your fault they buried their gifts, it's not your fault they ignored their calling, it's not your burden to carry their bitterness. You keep walking in grace, you keep doing what God called you to do. Because the very thing they hate about you is the very thing God is using to bless others. When you start succeeding, especially when they counted you out, it shakes the foundation of what they believed about you and about themselves. They remember when you were stuck, they remember when you were silent, they remember when you were struggling. They never expected you to rise, but here you are. Still standing, still going, still trusting, still praising. And that confuses the enemy because you weren't supposed to survive, you weren't supposed to bounce back, but God had a plan for you all along. And no amount of envy can stop what He's already set in motion. Now here's something that stings a little. The people who envy you today might have been the very ones you once encouraged, the ones you poured into, the ones you lifted, the ones you believed in when no one else did. And that's why it hurts, not because they changed, but because you finally saw what was hiding behind their applause. Let that be a lifelong lesson. Not everyone who claps is truly cheering for you, not everyone who listens is really learning, not everyone who stays is genuinely standing with you. You've got to reach a place where your identity isn't tied to people's approval. And your purpose isn't shaken by people's opinions. God didn't call you to be liked, He called you to be faithful. He didn't raise you to blend in, He raised you to stand out. And yes, sometimes standing out means being misunderstood, sometimes standing out means being hated by the very people you tried to bring along. But even if they envy you, even if they walk away, even if their love quietly turns to hate, God still honors obedience, God still rewards faithfulness, God still lifts the humble. And in the end, it won't be their opinions that determine your future, it will be God's promise. There are moments in life where your growth is the very reason someone turns against you, not because you hurt them, not because you wronged them, but because your transformation confronts their stagnation. When you start to heal, when you start to rise, when you begin to mature, they see it, and what they see reminds them of everything they've avoided, everything they've neglected, everything they've refused to face. That's why sometimes people start hating you simply for doing better. It's not arrogance, it's not pride, it's the silent mirror you hold up just by walking in your purpose. You see, growth is a revealer. It doesn't just reveal what's new in you, it exposes what's missing in others. When you start saying no where you used to say yes, when you start setting boundaries instead of bending over backwards, when you start protecting your peace instead of people pleasing, they notice. And for some, that shift is uncomfortable. They were more comfortable when you were smaller, weaker, dependent. They felt secure when you stayed in the place where they first met you, confused, uncertain, stuck. But when you started stretching, healing, moving forward without their permission, it disrupted the entire dynamic they counted on. You weren't supposed to grow past their expectations, you weren't supposed to rise from what they saw you fall into, you weren't supposed to become strong in the very place they knew you were weak. That's when the attitude shifts, that's when the silence creeps in, that's when the support slowly turns to sarcasm and the love starts to feel like distance. Because some people were never really committed to you, they were committed to the version of you that made them feel good about themselves. There are people who will celebrate your growth as long as your growth benefits them. But the moment your growth starts to convict them, it becomes a problem. The moment your discipline starts to highlight their excuses, the moment your healing starts to highlight their wounds, the moment your courage starts shining a light on their fears, that's when the resistance begins. And it's not always loud, sometimes it's subtle, a colder tone, a backhanded compliment, a sudden absence when you need them the most. But don't let that shake you. Your journey isn't meant to make everyone else comfortable, it's meant to make you faithful. Faithful to who God is shaping you to become. And part of that journey will require leaving some attitudes behind, some habits behind, and yes, some people behind. Not out of bitterness, but out of obedience. Because God can't take you into your next season if you're still dragging along what only belonged to your past. People will say, "You've changed," and they'll be right. But what they won't say out loud is this: they miss the version of you they could control, the version who didn't know their worth, the version who over-explained, who second-guessed, who lived to be liked. But the moment you stopped asking for permission to grow, you became a threat to their comfort zone. And when people are forced to confront their own lack of growth, they often choose criticism over reflection. It's easier to label you the problem than to admit they haven't moved in years. But listen, don't dim your light to keep others comfortable in their shadows. You weren't created to shrink, you weren't called to stay trapped in cycles just to keep familiar company. Your growth is evidence that God is working in your life. And anyone who truly loves you, anyone who genuinely values your soul, will not be intimidated by your growth. They will be inspired by it. Yes, they might be challenged, but that's what real growth does. It stirs the hearts of those around you to grow too. That's how God moves in community, using one person's transformation to spark many. But not everyone will choose to be inspired. Some will walk away, some will distance themselves, some will criticize from afar, because they can't handle watching you go where they were never brave enough to go. And that's okay. Growth requires space, and sometimes the price of peace is letting go of what once felt like home. But remember this: God never removes without restoring. He never calls you out without preparing something better. The people who walk away during your transformation were never assigned to the version of you that God is now building. So bless them, forgive them, release them, and keep walking. Because what's ahead of you is greater than what you've left behind. Sometimes, when you've outgrown your past and stepped fully into your purpose, you start noticing little shifts, small signs that things aren't the same. You notice a sudden coldness in their tone. Their eyes no longer meet yours the way they used to. The conversations become shorter, the smiles less sincere, and the silence, once comfortable, now lingers like something unsaid. You ask them, "Is something wrong?" And they respond with, "Nothing." But deep down, you know something has changed. You can feel it in the air, in the distance, in the way their presence suddenly feels like absence. Why can't they admit it? Why can't they tell you what's really going on? Because sometimes the hate people develop toward you isn't born in their mind. It's birthed deep in their spirit. It's not something they can explain, because it's something they don't even fully understand themselves. What's happening around you isn't always about what you've done. It's about what they're wrestling with inside. It's a battle they can't put into words. Because their unrest isn't just emotional, it's spiritual. You see, your presence unsettles something in them, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're walking in truth. When someone isn't at peace with themselves, when they're hiding wounds they refuse to face, when they're burying guilt and running from conviction, they can't feel comfortable around someone who walks boldly in the light. So rather than confront their own darkness, they turn against your light. There's a battle raging in the unseen, a spiritual war that often plays out through human emotions. That's why the word reminds us, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not about personalities, it's not about petty arguments, and most of the time, it's not even about you. It's about what you carry, it's about the spirit within you, it's about the favor that rests on you and the grace you walk in. Because when you start moving in the spirit, those who are still walking in the flesh can't help but react, not because you attack them, but because your life exposes the places they've left dormant for far too long. Sometimes, people hate you because your peace confronts their chaos. You walk in calm. They thrive in conflict. You speak gently. They live in sarcasm. You forgive quickly. They cling to grudges. And when your life begins to reflect what they wish they had, instead of leaning in to learn, they pull away to protect. That's the truth. Some people would rather call your joy fake than confront their own bitterness. It's easier to label your happiness as inauthentic than to admit they've been living without peace for years. But this is where we have to be careful, not to internalize what is actually spiritual. Don't take it personal. When the enemy uses people to try to plant seeds of doubt in your spirit, don't let their coldness make you question your warmth. Don't let their withdrawal make you question your worth. What you're experiencing goes deeper than emotions. It's warfare. And when you're under spiritual attack, your greatest weapon isn't explanation, it's prayer. You don't need to defend your name in every room. You don't need to prove your heart to every person. What you do in the spirit will always accomplish more than what you say in the flesh. And let's be honest, sometimes the hate you feel from others is rooted in their jealousy of your resilience. They've watched you weather storm after storm, yet you still show up, you still serve, you still believe, you still love. And they're left wondering, how does she still have joy? How does he still trust God? Because they expected your pain to paralyze you, they expected your past to break you, but instead, God used it to build you. And that confuses them, that unsettles them, that frustrates the darkness still clinging to their soul. Never forget, even Jesus was hated without cause, not because he did wrong, but because he did right, not because he condemned, but because his righteousness made others confront their sin. His very presence stirred resistance, not because he shouted, but because he carried truth. And the same spirit that was in him is alive and working in you. So don't be surprised when people react to your growth with suspicion. Don't be surprised when they question your motives. Don't be surprised when they pull away without explanation or when they mock what they don't understand. But here's what I need you to hear: their rejection is not your responsibility. Their misunderstanding is not your mission to fix. Your call is to love them anyway, pray for them anyway, forgive them anyway. Because this isn't a battle between you and them, it's a battle between light and darkness, and light doesn't argue with darkness, it simply shines. It keeps shining, it refuses to be dimmed. So when people start hating you for no clear reason, when their behavior shifts without warning, step back and pray. Ask God for discernment, ask Him to guard your heart, ask Him to help you respond in the Spirit, not in the flesh. Because what's happening in the unseen is far more significant than what your eyes can see. This isn't the time to get petty. It's the time to get prayerful. It's the time to anchor yourself even deeper in the one who knows your heart and fights your battles. There will come moments in life when the very people you loved, the ones you prayed for, supported, stood by, and believed in, will begin to withdraw. They may not say it outright, but they'll start pulling back quietly, subtly. It begins with shorter conversations, fewer messages, eventually, silence. And you're left asking, what did I do wrong? Why does it feel like they're suddenly against me? But the truth is, not everyone is meant to walk with you into every season of your life. The silence you hear from them now may not be rejection, it may be God's protection. Sometimes, people start to hate you because they were never assigned to the healed version of you. They were attached to your brokenness, they were connected to your insecurity, they were comfortable with who you used to be, not who you're becoming. And now that you're walking in truth, in purpose, in strength, it makes them uncomfortable. Not because you've wronged them, but because your progress highlights their lack of it. Rather than confront their own stagnation, they choose distance, they choose detachment. Sometimes, they even choose disdain. But here's something deeper you need to understand: when God begins to elevate you, He will allow separation. And that separation doesn't always come with a loud betrayal. Sometimes it comes as a slow fade, a drifting. It's confusing, because you thought those people were for you, you thought they would always walk beside you. But God saw what you didn't, He heard the conversations you couldn't, He saw the hearts that secretly resisted your rise. And in His mercy, He removed them not to punish you, but to protect you. Not everyone can handle your calling, not everyone can walk beside someone who is serious about God. Some people liked you better when you were compromising, when you were lost, when you were unsure. But now that you're living with conviction, now that you've found peace in God's presence, they can't relate to you anymore. And instead of rising with you, they'd rather label you, dismiss you, or even speak against you. But listen to me carefully, this is not the time to chase people. Don't beg them to understand your journey, don't plead for their support. When God starts shifting your surroundings, it's because He's shifting your assignment, and some voices can't go where He's taking you. Not because they're bad people, but because they no longer align with your purpose. When your purpose changes, your relationships will too. That's part of growth, that's part of maturity, that's part of being led by the Spirit, not by your emotions. And yes, it hurts. It hurts when people you love pull away, it hurts when you give them your heart and they return silence, it hurts when they misinterpret your transformation and call it pride, when they mistake your boundaries for arrogance. But you must let them go. With grace, bless them, release them. Because clinging to what God is removing can delay what He's trying to build in you. God is calling you to higher ground, and not everyone has the strength to climb with you. That's not your fault, that's not your burden. You don't have to carry the weight of their opinions or their absence. Your assignment isn't tied to who walks with you, it's tied to who sent you. And when God sends you, He will sustain you with or without the people you thought you needed. Sometimes, the very people who walk away will later come to see what God was doing in your life all along. But that's not your job to worry about. Your job is to stay faithful, to keep walking, to keep growing, to keep loving. Don't harden your heart, don't let the silence of others drown out the voice of God. He's still speaking, He's still guiding, He's still leading you, through every valley and into every victory. There's a beautiful peace that comes when you stop fighting to be understood and start trusting that God fully understands you. And when you live from that place, when you stop chasing people and start chasing purpose, you will find the room may grow smaller. but your spirit grows stronger. The circle may tighten, but your vision will sharpen. And the loss of people, it won't feel like rejection anymore, it will feel like preparation. So if they walk away, let them. If they stop calling, release them. If they can't handle your healing, love them from a distance. Because what God is doing in your life is greater than their opinion, it's deeper than their misunderstanding, it's more powerful than their silence. Keep your eyes on the one who called you, keep your heart soft, let your steps be ordered by the God who never leaves, never forsakes, and always, always finishes what he starts.